Welcome to Nezo's Bad Shop. I'm Nezo, your host, and I don't have a runny nose tonight, which is really nice. You are looking at the YD-2 ZS. See how there's two letters there? ZS. Yes, this is the YD-2Z that has an S gearbox. That's literally all that's different about this version. Yeah, so this is Constructor's Digest. This is the car completely assembled. And you can see there's double-sided tape randomly sitting in the car. That is because this car has already been filmed for its shakedown out-of-box driving video. So now it's here after that with the electronics moved on to a next car. And the shock's a little bit leaky, a little bit wet, as per tradition with plastic shocks. Yes, so we're going to go through the manual, and I'm going to give you some build tips and stuff like that, and things I noticed along the way. But I will point out right away that if you build yours out of box and your steering kind of looks a little bit off, looks a bit goofy, with a little bit of suspension preload and ride height enabled, don't freak out, because it happened to me too. It seems to be Yokomo's new front end setting. Look at all the bump if I just hold the steering. I noted this in the shakedown video, but look at the amount of bump steer going on. I don't understand if this is the new philosophy with the new gen, lower end kits, because essentially the Z non-S, the regular Z, has been discontinued and renamed to the Rookie Drift. And if this is part of the new Rookie Drift setting, this bump drifty crap, this just ain't it. So I don't know who decided this was a good idea, but yeah, that's a thing, and that can be easily fixed with a little bit of tuning. But I will tell you, I measured everything with my vernier caliper, that thing, 3 times. Took the parts off the car, measured it to the manual 3 separate times, and it still did this. Still ended up with this. So yeah, don't panic. That's just how they said it, but it's not, doesn't drive very good. So you'll want to give it a little bit of a bench tune out of box, or at least just correct the bump steer and or the toe to get a little bit of proper drift acumen. But anyways, we're gonna dive through the manual, and we're gonna go step by step, and I'm gonna tell you what's what. All right, so let's get that going. Now, first thing, we'll open the manual. And, ooh, yes, I forgot. I put this stuff back in here. With this ZS car, they have included a free coupon entry to the Tsukuba Drift Arena. Very nice. So there's that. We'll just put that over there. And look, a sticker sheet. But, of course, it just says YD-2 and plus. Doesn't say Z or S or anything, because, they're lazy like that. So just get rid of that. It's nice to get stickers, but they're still wrong. Moving on to the manual. Things you'll need, tools, etc. Some of them are included, some of them are not. So you'll, I guess you have a whole tool set over here. You don't need a ton of tools, but it helps. So yes, jumping right in. Oh yes, and the other thing that's cool about the Z and the new gen kits is you will have to choose from the screw bags as needed the screws you need. These are somewhat lifelike, so you will be able to figure out which is which, and they do tell you the part numbers and stuff like that. And for that, I decided to come up with a little unique solution. If you have one of these screw holders type thing, to separate or whatever, do yourself a favor, take the screws out of the little separate screw bag, and each number, put them in one of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up, and separate the screws, so that when you have to go looking for like 3 of this screw here, you just 1, 2, 3. Makes your life a lot easier, because they, although made this a little bit more efficient, they made it take twice as much effort just to complete something that they used to do in one step. So, anyways. That's my workaround, and that works pretty good actually. So main chassis assembly, here we go now. Main chassis, and we're using, this is all plastic car pretty much, except for a couple aluminum parts here and there. So we'll go with suspension mounts and the screws. Straightforward, just note the positions. That's open hole going that way, and that's open hole going that way. This is the front, this is the rear. Just note that, and then the next thing you do is the battery holders. The posts, straightforward. I like to take my knife, which I'm not sure where that ended up, but I usually take the knife and use the blade and put the blade between the little slot there. When I'm screwing the screws in, it holds the post, which is really nice. The pieces under there. Then you'll come to the steering rod bell crank assembly, okay? And make your turnbuckles. Total length of 54.9 mil across the end to end. Make 2 of them. And in the steering rack, note the position, okay? Just take your time. Here is the steering link that goes from the steering bell crank to the servo. 34.6 mil across. And again, just take your time. Note the center link pins going into the center, or the bell crank post. And there's the bell crank base and the screws that hold those posts together, okay? And, I noted Loctite here. You're going to want to put Loctite on these screws to hold those posts in together. Very common, these posts come loose, especially that one right there my finger's on, because that's the one that takes most of the load on the steering. So that always comes loose. Put Loctite on it, or it will come loose, guaranteed. Also Loctite these screws that go into the top side, because they will come loose as well. But put oil in those bearings there and there, so the bell crank moves very nice, okay? Moving on, we'll put that steering assembly, yes, you'll bolt that onto the car. That's the last part. You'll bolt that onto the car. You put that aside. Gear diff assembly. The diff does come pre-assembled. Okay, so all you have to do is take the 4 screws out and fill it full of oil. And just fill it up to sort of almost the top of the gears there. Close it up. Make sure you got the gasket. Make sure the gasket's still there. Close it up. Tighten it up snug. And you're done. If you want to do full maintenance, there's the expanded view of the diff and where to put the black grease, the little packet of black grease they include. Okay, straightforward. And make sure you use the number 10,000 oil. That's this guy, 10,000 oil. This is for the diff, okay? Use that on there. Put that aside when you're done. Gearbox assembly. Now this is the S gearbox, so this is 4 gears, and it's the gears are laid down because the motor goes on top of them. Okay, so it's the high CG gearbox. Very simple. Bearings, idler shaft, the gears, put the bearings in, oil the gear, or oil the bearings, top shaft, done. Bearing on that side, don't forget, 2 bearings on your diff that you did previously. Bang, assemble it, you're done. Till you get to this point, which you take a bunch of these screws that it shows you what you need. All these parts are where you need, and just remember to, like for here, parts used on this page, screw, refer to your little screw setup, and away you go. So get your screws, bolt the transmission together, then come to your motor mount and use these exact hole positions, okay? Use those, bolt it to there, that's what you see here, done. Now, when you come to here, this is an aluminum spur gear holder, okay? Snug the screws into that holder. Snug them nicely. You can use Loctite if you wish, because that is aluminum. Snug them up nicely. You don't over tighten them. Just snug them up. Do a star pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Don't forget the pin there. Take your time. And when you bolt this whole assembly on, once that's together, use Loctite on that set screw there to hold the whole thing onto the transmission, or that will come out and you will have a bad time. Guaranteed. I've seen it happen on track enough times. So, once you've done that, you can then install your motor if you like, because it's not included, but if you have one ready to go in the build, bolt it in. And they do give you a pinion, 24 tooth, which is nice. I always like when you get included pinion. Made the note, Loctite on that set screw, on the pinion gear there, or it will come out and you will have a bad time. What if both of those came out together? Well, you're gonna have not a very good time. So don't forget that, okay? Very important, Loctite. Once you've done that, that's your transmission completed. You can take your transmission and bolt it to the chassis. 6 screws. It's going into plastic, so just fire it in there. Then your transmission is bolted to the car, and you'll then come to servo installation. So if you have your servo ready, you can assemble it as so. Make sure it's powered up and neutralized and neutral position when you put the horn on, servo horn, or it'll be out of whack when you go to set it up. If you don't have a servo, just put the screws here and here into the holder for placeholder and bolt the servo mounts onto the chassis. Mine aren't here because I moved them into another car, but they would be sitting right there. Yes, and then if you've got the servo and the horn on, connect it to the bell crank right there, the bell crank steering. Okay. After that, we'll move on to the front shock tower assembly. All right. There's the front shock tower. Loctite I have put between the screw and the upper shock mount. Okay, because it's a very good idea. Use that hole on the shock tower. Very good. Okay. That is what you want. Now, the front bulkhead, 2-piece, 1, 2. Note to position. Okay, note to position, very important. 2 screws, away you go, and then bring that assembly to this piece and bring them together. Bolt that together. Put it onto the front of the chassis. That's the complete front bulkhead. Okay, that's the back side of the front bulkhead. Once you're done that, move on to the rear shock tower. Okay, don't forget your screws and stuff. Just take your time. Note the position of where you want the upper shock mount. Okay, and you're going to build 2 turnbuckles down here. And you'll do a 59mm length overall. And this is for the rear. Don't forget the 2mm spacers here, black 2mm spacer, and put that in. Excuse me. Note the position of where you're putting the upper turnbuckle for the rear end. Okay. And note the position of the ball cup. See that? So that's that. And once you've done the rear shock tower assembly, put it on the rear of the shock tower. 2 screws. Rear of the shock tower. Rear of the transmission casing right there. Okay. Now it says down here, this part here is not used. So note that. There were a bunch of extra parts. Not so much a bunch, but there were a bunch of little spares, things like that. Excuse me. A bit of extra oxygen required. Okay. Number 10, front upper arm installation. Straightforward. Note the position of the turnbuckle. See that little band there? You'll want that on the inside. That denotes which way the reverse threads go. Okay, but assemble that, and 58.5 mil across the length of the whole assembly for calibration. Use your vernier caliper or this diagram for rough fitment. Okay. Now, when you finish that, you'll use them for here to install them onto the front bulkhead. Note the position of where you'll put the upper arm pin, okay, and the spacers, and the size of the spacers. Note those, okay. And yes, once you get that installed, you'll then move down to the lower front arm. And where are we down here? Okay, so this is one of the parts between this and this is where I ended up checking it 3 separate times and remeasured 3 times to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. But you can see, look at this. Ew, no good. That's geometry. This is the chase wheel. That's the leading wheel, and this is more than. This one is more than that one in this drift. That's no good. And this setting, for some reason, is what makes it happen when you have any kind of ride height enabled. So 65 mil here, okay, on the lower side, and up here 58.5, like I said. When we're done that, install your lower arms onto the chassis and note the spacers and make sure they move freely so that the suspension works properly. Because if it binds in any way, your car will definitely not drive good, and the suspension will get stuck. Yeah, and those are the screws that hold that piece on there. That's all they're showing there. Okay. Then you'll move to the front knuckles, aka steering block installation, what they call it, steering block. That's for the steering stopper, and just note the position there of where that goes. Put some oil in those bearings. Okay, build your front knuckle assemblies, and this is okay to do, to put your pin, hex, and then the wheel nut on, because that'll hold it on there. Some other cars it doesn't work out as well, so you wait. But yeah, you can do that. And then once you build the front knuckle, pop it onto the front end, upper steering tie rod, and the lower. Pop, pop, pop. And just note the positions of the ball cup, because that will affect drivability. Okay. So you can see it here. See, oh, no, you cannot see. Hold on. Now you can see. See the way that ball cup is sitting? See the orientation of it? The top and the bottom? Yes, that's what we want. Okay, moving on. Rear hub carrier, aka rear knuckle. The drive shafts are pre-assembled for you, but you can put a little bit of grease on them here as it shows. Note this is ball stud L with a spacer, okay? The long ball stud. So they give you that. Assemble your rear knuckles, and then you'll build them into the rear arms here, okay? And notice that ball stud there, that's the ball stud that has a spacer pre-installed on it, like a part of the thing. So that's that. Now, after you do that, you'll bolt the rear arms onto here, onto the rear end of the car, okay? Note the hole here in the suspension mounts, okay, that you did in the very first step. And this has double spacer on the back, and this is showing the 45.7 mount, because up front is the 43.5, whereas this is the 45.7. So if you want more rear toe in, you can change to the 48.7 here. Usually the setup that usually goes is you put the 45.7 up front and the 48.7 at the rear. So there's just an option for you. I wrote it there just so I wouldn't forget. And once that's all bolted together, make sure you connect the upper turnbuckle link to the rear knuckle. Okay, note the position. Now, once that's all said and done, you'll build your plastic shocks. And these are not too hard to build. The E-clips, I usually get my cutting board here, and then I take the shock shaft, place it down, and put the E-clip on the bottom side, clip it in for the bottom one, put the piston on, and then use a small pair of pliers to squeeze it onto the top of the piston. I'm going to do a how-to soon just to really illustrate how that goes. That's that. Once you do that, the rest of it is not too difficult, like I said. Put the collar on the body, the preload collar. Just put the piston and your shaft all the way through the body of the shock. And then put some oil on the O-ring before you slip it over the threads that are already down through the body. And then put the spacers on and screw on the bottom side of the shock. That will prevent the O-ring from getting cut if you put it in the body first and put the shaft through the O-ring that way when it's already in the body of the shock. Don't do that. Okay, do it the other way. So once you do that, shock shaft all the way at the bottom, install the ball cup on that. If you don't have, they don't have any illustration here, but if you don't have shock pliers like these, shock shaft pliers, then you can put the shock shaft between those numbers to pinch it. You can use like a Kleenex or a paper towel and put the pliers, put them between pliers and then pinch the shock shaft, or you can use side cutters and put the side cutters in the very top of the thread of the shock shaft, pinch it, and put your ball cup on. A couple different ways. Shock shaft holder is the best way, and I love it. Nice little tool for not that much money, and it's really efficient if you're a track mechanic and building lots of shocks. Once you're done the ball cup, shock shaft down, filler full of oil, slowly move it up and down to bleed the air, let it sit 5 minutes, whatever, 5-10, and then what I like to do is, instead of doing it this way where you put the bladder on, I like to put the top hat into the collar, the top the cap nut they call it, and then put the bladder into the bottom side of that with a little dab of oil so it all sits together, just holds together. Flip it over, screw it on, and usually bleed out enough oil and you have a good flow. Plastic shocks are notorious for, you build one, it could be perfect. You build the next one, it takes you 5 tries. You build the next one, 2 tries. Then you build the last one, 10 tries. And you get it bled correctly. That's just the way the plastic ones are. If it gives you a good kind of semi-stiff feel off the beginning, just go with it, because it doesn't matter what you do or how perfect you make a plastic shock, it'll start leaking and it'll start to feel half dead within a week or so. That's just the way plastic shocks are. Yeah, so don't fret if it gets leaky like this or too soon. It's just the way they are. Just another reason to get aluminum shocks. They work all right, these ones. They get the job done. Finish it off with your springs for the front and rear, and put your bottom spring collar on there, spring cup they call it, for the front and rear, and away you go. Then you install it on the car, straightforward. O-rings to hold it on the top, and clip it into the ball stud on the bottom. And then you move on to the front bumper, which is easy peasy. 3 screws, put the bumper on, install your front body posts. Okay. And then put your foam bumper on top of the body post, or top of the front bumper assembly. Then the rear body post. Note the positioning. Okay. Note the positioning. How that works. Okay. Then, if you want, put these body mount pieces on. I don't really use those, but you can put those on. Build your rear diffuser. Do the large bat wing, or you can do the shorty. I like the shorty personally. For a basic level kit, use the shorty. But this gives you protection and a bit more rear weight if you want. So that's up to you. And after that, then you've pretty much done the chassis. You've done a good amount. And you're almost done. You just have to put your electronics in. You can put them in as you like. They give you a little bit of illustration. Then you put your top deck in, and the only interesting part here is you'll use an aluminum piece back here. That's this piece to go off the transmission and to connect to the upper deck here. So you can put Loctite to those screws if you want, but you don't have to. I did, and I put Loctite on that little guy there because if you're boosting, your vibrations might rattle through and loosen some stuff up. So I did put it on that little screw, so that's a good idea. And then you have choice of battery holders, the slim shorties or the long extendo boys tall. So you can do standard pack. This chassis will let you do either or, which is really nice. See, long, short. And then once you're done that, you can install tires that are not included. So you make sure you have your own tires ready to go. I think these are MST like 8mm of offset, good amount. Yeah, and then after you've put the wheels on, you're pretty much done. Very straightforward kit install, nothing too wild or things like that, but yeah, you'll definitely want to tune out of the crazy toe-in feature, the geometry. I don't know, you could want to tune out of that anyway, the bump steery. So other than that, yeah, this is a plain setup sheet, and then there's an exploded view over here. There's some part numbers back here, and that's that. And there it is, the YD-2 ZS Constructor's Digest. So yeah, other than the tuning issue in the front, if you want to run it out of box, run 0 ride height, like 1mm maybe, and then it'll drift somewhat out of box. But other than that, you're gonna need to tune it a bit. But yeah, this car is going to be superseded more than likely by the Rookie Drift and options for the Rookie Drift, so I don't think the ZS will be around too much longer, considering the Z Basic has been rebranded to the Rookie Drift. But if you got one, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think, and yeah, we'll have a chat online and we'll go from there. And this car, I don't think will stay in my fleet. It'll probably end up getting resold. This one actually I think is owned by the owner of Strictly, so this will probably end up in the cabinet. Could be a rental, I'm not sure, but we're gonna need electronics for it. But yeah, thank you for watching, and always more to come. And yes, RD1 at some point, the successor to this, basically similar car. And yes, we'll catch you later. Till next time, goodbye.